See if we can do this together. Our next presenter is a young man who has over 30 years of experience in engineering and business management. I think of those 30 years, I've probably known him about 20. And that's Doyle Sumrall, who has worked with NTEA, and that started our relationship. Prior to his current management role at NTE, he has held several executive positions, including Vice President of Manufacture for Steel Scott Fitzer Company, and directed engineering and operation and general management for hydraulics for Walco Truck Equipment Company. This young man has, and I got all these young men around me, you can see, has a wealth of knowledge, and we relied on him, particularly in the greater Washington region, for a lot of training and insight on truck delivery systems, and he was always very helpful as it related to alternative fuel programs. So, Doyle, it's all on you. Oh, I need to pull up. Huh?
Down here, yeah, let me see. There's down here at the bottom somewhere, there's a little. There should be slideshow somewhere. Where we go? Slideshow. From beginning.
Good to go. That's it? Okay.
Doesn't look like it on the screen, but all right. Hello. Well, Ron, that was a fabulous introduction. I don't know what to say. With NTEA, NTEA's the Work Truck Association, so trucks built in multiple stages, not so much the over-the-road things, but all of the pickups and vans and snowplows and those sort of things. We have 1,800 members across the United States, and the little clicker thing's not working. We can figure that out. Yeah, it's changing here, but not down there or up there. Technical challenges. Now give it a try. Nothing. Sorry, folks. What the heck is going on? Ta-da. All right, so 1,800 members across the United States. We have a number of affiliate divisions which focus on specific areas of snowplow or sustainability, the Green Truck Association. And every year we take a look at what's going on in the fleet community. So our members span everybody from OEMs like GM to fleets like Florida Power and Light, both great members of the NTEA, and we appreciate them. And so it's the whole spectrum. And we are equally agnostic about fuels and technologies. And I think that's one of the reasons that Jennifer invited us here to talk from that kind of global view position of how these things all work together and what's important. And I've tried to put together a series of slides that will talk a little bit about the industry segment, its size, and the opportunity, through to what are fleets saying about various fuels and technologies where they're headed. So we're a multi-billion-dollar market. City snowplows, commercial barriers and vans, the whole 9 yards, and propane, biodiesel, electrification of trucks. It's a huge market and a tremendous opportunity. The outlook is extremely bright. So we're in a good place. From 2009 through 15, we grew out of the really tough times that have been talked about here to a great place. And in 2016, we saw a little bit of a pullback. Class 8 probably got hit harder than anybody else, but where we're at today, we're going to see 17 maybe back a little. I think the most recent forecasts are showing a little more strength, and then growth again on out to 2020. So good place to be. It's solid. The market's pretty strong. A lot of opportunity for new things come in when it's that way. When things are really tight, it's hard. When the market is strong, it's a lot easier to bring these technologies to bear. So you see here the truck sales forecast, again, growing. It's segmented. Jennifer is going to make these slides available. And at the end of the presentation, there's some other slides that I've added in that have more detail you might find interesting. It's also an aging fleet. One of the things that's been a little bit astonishing is to watch through the years that the fleet has not gotten younger. We're selling more trucks. There's a lot of them going in, but we continue to see an aging trend. And some of that is good news. The trucks are built better. The equipment that's going on them is better, corrosion resistance and all those things. The technology integration is a lot more sophisticated. They're more expensive, so having them last longer is a really good thing. But it also poses an opportunity for things like biodiesel, which are kind of ubiquitous. We can use that across all the trucks. Some of the newer technologies require some of the more sophisticated systems on trucks, so it's interesting to look at this particular venue, the people and the focus, and say, you can use this everywhere. You bring it in, you can immediately put it in your 05 as much as you can put it in your 2015. So good news there. And some of this data is courtesy of IHS, which purchased Polk. So Polk Automotive, a great partner of ours, and they provide us with some of this information. The change in fuel deployment is pretty interesting. Diesel has stayed extremely strong. We've seen a little bit of a pullback, 2%, but that's within margin of error. And gasoline staying pretty stable. Natural gas pretty much level, and other is growing just a little bit. So the whole combination of some of the things they're talking about here, electric and hybrids and those things, propane, we're seeing a little bit of growth. But diesel remains strong and is going to remain strong for decades. There's no change on that horizon from what we can see. This gets into, we had 300 plus fleets respond to the survey that we did at the beginning of last year. And I apologize, we're in process of taking this survey right now. I've got one little snippet for you in there to talk to a peek at what they're telling us about their outlook for 17 and what they did in 16. So this is 15 data and outlook for 16. But you can see that when it comes to the fleet approaches to saving fuel, and that you always got to keep in mind, fleets are looking at how do we save fuel, how do we better position ourselves in the market, and obviously health and well-being of their market area is extremely important to them. But their primary comes back to driver behavior and driver interaction. And a lot of conversation about how biodiesel and some of these other technologies are making the trucks that they operate more comfortable. They feel like they're in a healthier environment. And as hard as people are to get and retain, those are extremely important things. And if they motivate their drivers, they get better fuel economy. And that's extremely key to their operations, always in the forefront. Alternative fuels is right at the top of the list as well, and then we've got a smattering of others, including electrification. We've got some electrification information for you toward the end. When they look at where they're going, and here's where we're going to share some of the 17 information, in 16 we saw for the first time biodiesel surpass natural gas as an area of deployment, and that was an interesting change in the things that we'd been seeing going on. And it remains strong, equal to natural gas in terms of their interest of deployment for 17. So as we get the rest of this information pulled in this survey and this study, which will be presented at the Work Truck Show in March of this year, so watch for that. This information will be coming. I expect to see more information about diesel and the importance that we see there. E85, obviously very high, talk about flex fuels, but that's across such a broad range that it's pretty easy to understand why people are picking that up, and in some cases it just comes regardless. And then hybrid, I think, is kind of holding its own, and hydraulic hybrid is coming on. So you're seeing a number of technologies still having a high level of interest, regardless of the fuel prices, regardless of some of these other things. Fleets are committing these strategies. They're forward thinking. We looked at how old their trucks are, and so when you make a decision to buy, you're looking out 20 years. I could have this vehicle in my fleet for 15 to 20 years, and I want to build a fleet strategy. So I'm not going to one-of things unless I'm a fairly large fleet. If I'm buying into these concepts, it's for the long run. And cost of deployment, and we'll see a little bit about their thinking about that later on, but cost of deployment and life cycle costing are key drivers in their decision making. And so where you can look at biodiesel and see those immediate benefits and return to health benefits, and it's a sustainable strategy for their long-term vision for the fleet, those things become very important in the decision-making process. And that comes out here in terms of what are their future expectations. And biodiesel stands very high and very tall in the last survey that we did, and I expect to see that same thing in 17. A little bit of challenge comes in who's deploying it. And this is a fairly technical slide and kind of busy, but if you look at it along the edge where you see the fleet sizes and you look at the technologies that are being deployed, the larger fleets are taking the most risks. And as they take those risks and they get comfortable with them, then they're deploying more and more of them. It's the smaller fleets that are having the challenge. If they only have 10 trucks in their fleet and they look at making a change with one truck, that's 10% of their fleet. That's a pretty huge commitment. And if you're a small township with just a couple trucks, that's even a bigger challenge to you. And so things like we saw in the presentation was just prior to this, which the B20 Club, where multiple fleet managers can talk about the successes they're having and share those with the other fleets. I think this is a great area of expansion and a tremendous opportunity for the industry, not only for biodiesel, but all the other technologies. Electrification is also something that we see, and we're not so much on traction drive, not full electric trucks. Those have not been particularly successful. There's been some experiments. Largest one was 211 of them deployed with ERA funds. Those things haven't gained traction. Costs are too high. Commitment is too high. Risks are fairly high in that deployment, where we look at some of these other technologies, they're not. Auxiliary electrification, however, to mitigate idling, to provide the ability to run with a more silent environment where the operators can talk, has gotten a lot of traction. So we're seeing a lot of EPT, what they commonly refer to as an EPTO, is coming into the market. There's an awful lot of those things. Taking those parasitic loads off the engine are very important to the OEMs, and so they're supportive of this. And when you can have a powerful engine, diesel run for 6 to 10 minutes and fully charge a fairly substantial battery pack and then operate the truck for 3 to 4 hours in the work site. That's a very efficient use and combination of those two technologies. So fairly strong showing there. A lot of battery pack utilization in the electrification. And the reasons that they tell us that or the things that they're doing with the electricity on the vehicles, a lot of bucket operation. The utility fleets and communications fleets were early on adopters. Environmental controls, so when you're sitting around not having to idle to heat or cool, are high on the list. And then worksite operations, EPTO, we talked about. Engine off, electrification, and they're highly motivated for those things, particularly around less idle time. And this has been a real eye-opener. The DOE started a program with Argonne National Labs to talk about idle reduction and idle management. When those folks first started looking at it, they didn't realize how much trucks idle. We see these work trucks idling hours a day. Key to the fleet managers, as they tell us in the surveys, is the fuel use reduction. So every gallon of fuel they avoid using is a $2.50 to $3 savings, depending on where the prices are. And of course, overall cost of operation lowering, so better maintenance, less engine wear, all those sorts of things. Where they really hit home, and when you see these kind of numbers, it's really impressive that 82% of the fleets that we surveyed, and they're across all fleet, so it's ag, it's construction, it's municipal, it's everything, in all sizes. 2 to 3 trucks up to 50,000. 82% of the fleet managers said reducing my idle is a key thing to do. And so when we talk with them about that and ask them about what their average idle times are, you can see that about 35% of them say they're idling between 3 and 4 hours a day. So elimination of that idling is extremely important to them, and it has a lot of benefits. What they're doing to do the idle reduction management is, again, key business reasons really boils down to money and fuel use. Most effective idling solutions, again, driver behavior, so motivating the drivers to be part of the solution, extremely important to them. Reduced incidental idling, so things that don't really need to be going on. Engine shutdown, automatic on their trucks, extremely important. Telematics, so that they can monitor and report and manage. What they're planning to do as they move forward is focus on those things. Work with the drivers, vehicle electrification technologies added to the trucks and other things. And then to come back to diesel and kind of end our thoughts and what we had to share with you today, the diesel penetration numbers are significant. This is over millions of trucks. So this is Class 3 through Class 8, millions of trucks in the United States. Through January through September of 16, we see the numbers staying extremely high with as much as 94 to 95% of them on the high end, where the torque and tow capabilities are extremely needed. A little bit of change came in Class 4. We saw some gas penetration come in, but we expect to see, with some of the new diesel offerings coming on and new diesel production coming online, these diesel numbers increase again as we move forward 17, 18, 19. Talked a little bit about payback earlier, and I think that's where it comes home for biodiesel again. Anything that a fleet can do that is in a 1 to 2 year or less payback is like golden. Doesn't take long to justify doing those things. They're immediately interested. They're not difficult. When you get beyond that and you start talking about 3 to 4 year deployment and beyond to get the payback, they just have a very tough time justifying it. And I think we're going to take questions at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.